as we suggested, spending on research and development remains short of the 1% GDP target set. Why is that?
The expenditure on research and development has increased in nominal terms, and that the increase has been quite large, about 12%, but that has not kept pace with the increase in inflation. So in some of the sectors, the Science Council sector and the business sector, growth was greater than inflation, but in other sectors such as the government sector, the R&D expenditure fell behind the inflation rate, resulting in us not reaching the target of 1% of gross domestic product by this year.
Okay, talking about the discrepancies in the sense that the nominal increase has been over 12%, but it's still not 1% of GDP. Just getting past the numbers, why do you think it is that we're not hitting the mark? You've referred to issues of expenditure and how procurement costs and inflation have risen. Who are the worst offenders? Business, the universities, the governments?
No, I think business has really been coming to the party. Business has been a strong performer of R&D in the country and always provides a significant part of the funds. It's over 50% of the funds come from business. I think government is constrained by the budgets, particularly with the budget cuts that they've recently had to endure. And I think in 2008 there was some warning of pending economic crisis, and that affected the expenditure rates across all the sectors.
Now, in terms of the spread for researching functions, as you've referred to, the business sector has done particularly well, spending about 58% on research, total research done in South Africa. You've referred to the limitations of the public sector, but some would think that the universities and the institutions of higher learning are the incubators for innovative thinking, and they're not doing well.
I'd say the universities are under severe constraints. They get limited funding from government. They need extra funding. They're also the producers of the human resources required in the country, the high-level skills, and they're just not able to produce enough. And there's a whole problem of constraints with the education system and pupils coming through with sufficient, with good passes in matriculation, maths and science, ready to go into engineering or medical or scientific careers. So there's a big constraint in the system starting at the schools, and it's going to take a long time for the country to sort this out.
Now, referring back to the fact that business has done well in spending on research and development, the more optimistic view would be that's a good thing, because it suggests that we're thinking about innovation in industry, especially because we need it in key areas such as manufacturing and automotives, for instance. So this is a good indication for the South African economy. Do you concur?
I concur with that. It's a sound point of view. I think the business knows that by doing research and development, research and experimental development, it increases its competitiveness in the long run. So that they've got new ideas, new materials to experiment with, and they come up with something that the company owns uniquely because they've done the research. And I think it's important in terms of allowing business to develop further in the country. In terms of human resources, the business sector has also been very important as an employer of skilled human resources in terms of research and development. And of course the higher education sector is the one that's producing the human resources, but operating under the constraints that I mentioned.
I know that the study was very South African focused, Mr. Blankley, but could you give us an indication as to how South Africa compares on R&D spend to countries such as China or Brazil or India that are growing exponentially?
Well, China, Brazil and India have got huge R&D expenditures in terms of the quantum. I mean, it's vast, and I know that India and China have both got over 1 million full-time equivalent researchers, whereas South Africa's only got about 20,000. So they're vastly different scales. And obviously the United States is the biggest spender on research and development in the world. So South Africa is a relatively small player. We've also started doing R&D surveys in Africa and innovation surveys in Africa, and these are starting to form some quite interesting results.
You keep on referring to human resources. Can we talk about the perennial bugbear when it comes to South Africa, and that's the skills deficit? How is the slow pace of skills development being addressed in fields such as engineering that you mentioned earlier on, science and mathematics and technology, where a lot of the brains trust would emerge?
Well, things are happening very slowly. And as I mentioned before, the school system is a major constraint on development of human resources and lack of maths and science skills in the young graduates. And unless we can really sort out this problem with the human resources supply in the country, I think research and development expenditure is going to remain low, and there will not be as much progress as was hoped in this area.
Well, on the bright side, though, we're told that in terms of gender equity, South Africa has performed really well comparatively speaking to other countries internationally, with over 39% of people working within the research sector being women. I think we're just under Argentina, which is the top performer within this particular issue and area. Why is it that we've done well and other countries are not doing well? Countries like Japan, which are great innovators, have less than 20% of women working in the R&D sector.
Well, I think women have always been able to access the university system, the education system, and that the throughput of women has not been a constraint on the system. Many women go into scientific careers, but there is some gender bias in say fields like engineering and the hard sciences, whereas women tend to dominate in the social sciences, and these are probably for historic reasons.
All right, just talking about areas where we direct a lot of our attention. Health, ICT, social sciences and agriculture are lagging in comparison to engineering sciences and natural sciences. Is that also not problematic in terms of attracting capital to R&D if we're just directing it towards engineering? I know we've got a huge infrastructure priority in South Africa, so we need that skill, but we've also got huge poverty in South Africa, and we need people addressing some of the challenges to poverty, healthcare and educational issues as well, but the investment isn't there.
Yes, engineering is very important, and the engineering is a strong component of the R&D in South Africa. Medicine is also very strong. The social sciences are fairly strongly supported in South Africa in terms of R&D expenditure. It's higher than in most other countries. But I think there still has to be an application. We're still not solving problems. Scientists are tending to remain in their silos. They're not really working together to try and solve social problems. I haven't seen much progress in that area. We talk about it a lot. We say that science is going to help solve social problems, but it tends to be government in the end intervening and not always coming up with the best solutions.